Motivation Monday, and I've got an interesting conversation we want to get into today as we talk about a sense of purpose and belonging. But before we engage, I have a question for you, my question of the day, and I have an interesting question for you today. Would you risk your life for your country? Would you be willing to risk your life for your country? Share your thoughts with me on 20316 for SMS and WhatsApp 0786316316. Today we get to hang out with a rabbi, Rabbi Nathanael. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Have you learned some Swahili?
Kidogo.
Kidogo.
Yeah.
How long have you been in Kenya?
About 2.5, almost 3 years.
Almost 3 years.
Yeah.
Are you the only rabbi in the country?
Yeah, so I'm currently the only rabbi in East Africa. So I'm the rabbi for the community here in Kenya, Nairobi mainly.
Okay.
And then I go around to other communities in East Africa. There's a community in Uganda, a few communities in Uganda, a community in Tanzania. And I have ties with other communities, Mozambique and Zambia, Zimbabwe, yeah.
We have a big Jewish community in Kenya.
Not huge, but in comparison to the other ones, so there's a community that's been here for about 120 years, estimated at around 500 Jews in Nairobi area, and
500?
Yeah, 500 Jews in Nairobi area. We have Israelis, Americans, Europeans, a group of Kenyans who went through a conversion, Uganda, and yeah, so an estimate of around 500. And then there's some Jews in Mombasa, some Jews in Naivasha, a bit over here, a bit over there.
Okay. So is this what you always envisioned to become a rabbi?
No, not at all. Not at all.
How did you end up becoming a rabbi?
I got into teaching. Started working with little kids and teaching. And when I saw that I enjoyed that aspect of my work.
Yeah.
And then I was traveling with my wife around the world, and every place we got to, I realized that I was working with, I would get to a place and I'd be teaching Jews that were not connected, that were either living there or traveling also, and non-Jews that were always interested because I was often the first Jew they met. So when I was traveling in Asia or traveling in Africa and people got excited, it was the first time that they met a Jew, traveled to places and bumped into people who are anti-Semitic and never have met a Jew before. They just know that they're supposed to not like us, right? And then they have an opportunity to have a conversation and come out educated. So it felt like something that was very right for me to do. And a few years back, my wife and I discussed it and decided we were going to leave Israel to be emissaries and go somewhere in the world to work with Jews and Jewish community, and the opportunity came up to come to Kenya, and we were very excited to do so. Yeah.
Okay. So what does it entail to be a rabbi?
So it's a lot of learning. So I grew up religious my entire life. So I grew up basically in what's called a yeshiva world. So yeshiva literally means to sit. So it's a place for religious studies where you sit, you learn, and you immerse yourself in Jewish studies. So you go to a religious school as a kid, and then a religious high school, and then before the army, you spend a year or two learning in a yeshiva. You finish the army, you go back to yeshiva. And then I was learning to get my bachelor's degree in psychology and education, and decided to go back to yeshiva again in preparation of coming and becoming a rabbi. So it was another few years of sitting and learning in preparation of this.
Okay. So what are you currently now when you look at being the only rabbi in East Africa? What do your duties entail?
So some of this, some of that. A lot of it is working with my community. So I have a community that comes to my synagogue in Nairobi. And
we have a synagogue in Nairobi.
We have a synagogue in Nairobi.
Where is it? For those who may not know.
So it's in the CBD. It's not in a public location. Like people don't know about it. Yeah. For security reasons also.
Yes.
But we have a synagogue over here in Nairobi that dates back as old as the community goes back, and it's a beautiful synagogue. You're welcome to come visit.
I should.
And we have, so like there's work inside the synagogue, there's outreach with the people in the community, those who are more affiliated, less affiliated, sitting, talking, getting to know them, having events around the Jewish holidays, right, and having people connect in that way. I do talks like this, a lot of interfaith work.
Okay.
It's something I believe in. I believe that one of the biggest problems that we've had throughout history and one of the big causes for fights and disputes have been misinformation. And just people do not know enough. So in my opinion, that's something very important that we sit, we have conversations so people could be more educated. I think that's the biggest battle that we have right now is fighting misinformation. I do there's a whole bunch of other work revolving life cycles and events and stuff like that.
Okay. Well, there's a time I did a series. The first hour of this show is usually what we call the devotional hour.
Okay.
And we go through the scriptures and we learn some things. And there's a time I did a series on the feasts of Israel. Had I known you were there, I would have called you.
Well, we can do it another time.
We should do it another time. I think that would be interesting. That would be interesting. There's something you mentioned earlier on. You said you had to go to the army.
Yeah.
Is it a requirement for every person in Israel to go through the army?
So unfortunately, we're in a situation where everyone needs to go to the army. Everybody does it. There's something that's very nice because it unites a nation.
Okay.
Right? Like we're all. It's part of the conversation. It's so where did you serve? Right? Like everyone. So it's rare when you hear someone that says, I did not serve, right? So that usually means that they came to Israel when they were older, they moved to Israel when, right, like in a different stage of life, or they had something that didn't allow them to. Sometimes you'll hear people who actually serve spiritually, who will say, my service to the nation is by sitting and praying and learning and learning scriptures, learning Torah. Right, so we have that as an option for groups that are in a specific religious group that says that this is the way that they would like to serve the nation, and they sit and pray and learn on behalf of the nation. This goes back to actually King David. So King David had the most powerful army that we know to date of the Jewish army that ever was, and his tactics were half the soldiers are learning and praying and half the soldiers are fighting. And for every soldier that's fighting, there's a soldier that's praying for him. Yeah, and we'll circle back to that later. But there's a lot there. We believe in the power of prayer and the power of learning Torah for the sake of protection, and that has an equal role to play in our fight.
Okay. With everybody having to go through the army, how do you think that has helped Israel as a nation?
Well, it unites you because everybody has some common background.
Yeah.
If you're growing up, did you grow up in Nairobi?
Yes.
Right. So if you grow up in Nairobi and you never leave Nairobi, you will only know the people of Nairobi.
True.
And if the tribes never mixed, you would only know very specific tribes here in Nairobi, right? You would be familiar with Kikuyu, some, Maasai, some, you would have like very specific ties with those people. But what happens if we said, well, everybody has to go to the army over here? So you would show up and suddenly you would meet people from Turkana and from Watamu and from, right, like suddenly there's like, we're all together in this, right? So you have people from the north and the south, from people that are religious and have a complete anti to religion, that we all sit and we mix together, and you say, hey, we're not so different, right? We have more in common than we disagree on, and it's the great equalizer in a way.
So, with what's going on with Israel and Palestine, you are called back home.
Yeah.
How did that work?
So, on the 7th of October, which was a holiday, it's Simchat Torah, which is the last day of Sukkot, okay, a festival in the end of our high holidays. So we have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur,
Yes.
Sukkot, and in the end of Sukkot, there's a holiday called Shmini Atzeret, the eighth day. And the eighth day in Israel is also Simchat Torah. So Simchat Torah is a day that we celebrate finishing the cycle of learning the Torah. So we go through a cycle the entire year.
Yeah.
And all over the world, we take the Torah out of the ark, we dance around with it in the synagogues, and it is one of the happiest, most joyful days of the year. And at that moment is when Hamas attacked, right? It was planned very, very, very on purpose for this day, for a day of celebration, a day of happiness, to try to make it into a day that we will remember as a day of sorrow, right? Like this was, we're dealing with something different now. And as soon as that happened, Jews from around the world got up and came to Israel. And that is a very unique thing, because you don't have another place in the world that you hear there's a war and people are going to it as opposed to running away.
Yeah.
Right? So in this moment that we had the war starting, everybody was trying to see, how can I come back and serve? How can I come and protect my nation, right? So like people have been saying to me often, say, how is your family safe? And I go, my family is safe, but we're still going through a lot. They say, no, but if your family's safe, then you're fine. No. My family is every single person of the nation, right? In the essence of what being a Jew is, we're not a race, right? We're not, right? It's not all Jews are white, all Jews are black, all Jews are, we come from all over the place, and who we are as Jews is one big family, okay? And when we say Kol Yisrael arevim ze lazeh. All of Israel are responsible one for another. When I hear of a Jew that was killed in France or in the Philippines, or right, my heart aches, right? Because it's not, another person was killed, right? Like usually on a emotional level, the more removed you are from the situation, the less pain you feel.
True.
Right? So if you heard that someone was shot in Iran, it doesn't bother.
No
it doesn't.
big
You're
deal.
not fazed by it. People die all the time, and there's bad things that happen all the time.
Yeah.
But if you heard that, God forbid, your brother was shot, then suddenly you
Yes.
feel it. There's pain.
Yes.
Right? And for us, it's as soon as there's a Jew that's attacked anywhere in the world, you go, my brother was killed. Right? Like my brother was attacked. My sister was hurt. And what we went through just now, we haven't had anything like this since the Holocaust.
Yes.
We've had wars before,
But not...
and nothing like this. Like my grandfather's a Holocaust survivor, okay, from Germany. And last week while I was in Israel, I was driving him back home, okay? So I'm there in my uniform and sitting there in the car next to him and sitting and talking with him as someone who remembers, Kristallnacht, the night that the Germans go and attacked and, broke the windows and storefronts of Jews in Germany and around certain places in Europe, and go in and are burning down synagogues. And he remembers going through a major part of the Holocaust. And I asked him, I said, I said, I'm sorry that we're going through this a second time in your lifetime, right? Like no one thought this was going to happen again. And he said, this is not the same. This is way worse. And saying worse than the Holocaust is hard to get to.
Yeah.
Right? Like when people don't understand this, but when the Germans started the final plan of exterminating all the Jews and executing, they went around and they were shooting all the Jews. And the German soldiers had so much psychological pain themselves, they couldn't handle it, that the German army started trying to get them drunk and bring in women and do whatever they could to make them forget the pain, until they came up with a more humane way of exterminating Jews
Okay.
by the gas chambers, and
Yeah.
how can they get rid of Jews in a way that you're less connected. This was, how do I get as connected as possible? And you had things over there, and I don't know what people are exposed to, and this is more of a family channel, and I'm not going to get into details
Yeah.
over there, but the world has not seen something like
Like
this.
this, yeah.
And this was absolutely terrible, and more horrific than really anything that our generations have seen. And like, this goes back to the dark ages of like how barbaric people can get. And the response from the world should have been, oh my God, you are fighting the worst kind of evil in the world, okay? Here's all the power that you need to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And instead, we didn't hear that cry. Instead of that, we heard, there needs to be a ceasefire, it's disproportionate, the Israelis are attacking back. You say, wait 1 second, right? Like, if this happened in your country, right? When Al-Shabaab comes and attacks inside Kenya, do we say, wait, a proportionate response, or do we say, get rid of Al-Shabaab, right? What is the proportionate response to these types of things?
Yeah.
You're fighting evil, and what people are mistaken right now is they think that this is an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is not.
It's not.
This is a fight of good and evil, and it's coming for everywhere in the world. It's going to be, everybody is being tested. Are you good? Are you bad? Are you going to be on the right side of things? Right? Like, how do you view this? And when we saw what happened, there's something in every Jew and in every Israeli that just like snapped and said, I can't not be in Israel, right? And I called up my officer and I said, I'm coming back due to the fact that I'm outside of Israel.
Yeah.
There's bureaucracy stuff, so it took me a few days till I got permission, right? So that was part of it. But then I got on a plane, went back there, and I joined my unit. So my unit is a unit in the hills of Judea, and basically it's there to protect civilians. Okay, and we are in every single community. We stay there and we protect the community itself, so that what happened on the 7th of October does not repeat itself everywhere in Israel. Because right now we have these units everywhere with this thing that we're concerned that will happen again, as it is a possibility, right?
I think for me what I find very interesting is the initiative. It's not like you're forced to come back, and serve. What you're telling me is that every Israeli out there knows it's their responsibility,
It's an
and
instinct.
they went home willingly.
It's an instinct. It is the only nation in the world that there's a war, and people return to go to the war as opposed to running away, right? So since the beginning of the war, over 300,000 Jews returned.
300,000.
Yeah. Our population grew by 3%.
Oh my goodness.
Because of this. People went back to fight because we don't have another option. People don't understand this, right? We don't have another option. The world has made that very, very clear. We have been kicked out of every place in the world, and we went back to our homeland, right? And now we were being told, leave your homeland, right? Like, just go and die. And we're not okay with that. And Jews understand that if Jews are not safe in Israel, we're not safe again everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
The purpose of the state of Israel, not the land of Israel. The land of Israel is, we have a historic connection to, okay, that anyone who believes and has learned knows our history, right? Like the stories of Jesus, where did those happen, right? As a Jewish rabbi, right? Like it is happening, his stories are happening in Israel as a Jewish place, right? Like all of these things are clear to anyone who is learned, right? And we're coming back to our homeland because we have no other place. And we make a country, like we make the state of Israel, because we have no other choice,
Okay.
right? And if the world says, well, you can't have it, the cries of the Palestinians that are protesting, or the pro-Palestinians, which is another whole story, but
Yeah.
that are yelling from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, is saying, we want to kill all the Jews. Right, like that's what people are missing. It's not we want a two-state solution. From the river to the sea means it's not, oh, there's an occupied territory,
No.
there's this, there's no. It's every single place needs to be cleansed of Jews. There is no we can live together in their agenda, right?
Okay.
And because of that, we say, if we are cornered and we are forced to fight, and we must, then we must.
Then we must.
And every Jew understands that in their place of, well, then I'm called back to serve, and I'm called back to fight because I need to. And every one of us, you know, you leave your families behind, you leave your jobs behind, you
Yeah.
leave whatever you could. So I went and I did now a month in the army, and I finished my job that I was supposed to do. And it could be that I will be going back. It could be that I'll be staying here.
Yeah.
But I believe that this type of work of working with the community and strengthening the Jews also outside of Israel, and trying to impact right now the rest of the world and having them understand the situation and have solidarity, right, is extremely important as well. And we're fighting a war in many different fronts.
Very, very true. Purpose and belonging, we are talking to Rabbi Nathaniel in studio today. Thank you for your thoughts and your comments. Earlier on, I'd asked you a question, would you be willing to die for your country? John Githanga says, honestly, it would be difficult for me to risk my life for my country. It's not because I wouldn't want to. It's because I doubt whether any of our leaders would join or support me in my sacrificial effort. My take is a strong sense of patriotism must be restored by our top political class before we can start becoming sacrificial. What do you think about that comment?
So it happens to be that it doesn't matter if I believe in my leaders, because I'm not fighting for my leaders. I'm not fighting for the prime minister. I'm not fighting for the members of the Knesset. I'm not fighting for this politician or that politician, and I'm not fighting even for my officers in the army, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm fighting for my home, right? I have my parents, my siblings, my wife, my children. So we are 8 children. 5 of us are in the army, right?
Yeah.
Like, I just came back, so 4, and they're all over the country in different places, and the other 3 are too young. But I'm not fighting for a political party or a political leader.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference. It's when you understand that you're fighting for your own survival, then yes, it's
different.
You become patriotic because you must, right?
Okay.
Like, that's the reality.
Okay. A couple of other thoughts coming in. Marcos say the unity of Israel should be emulated by many nations across the world, such a sense of belonging, which is missing today in many places. And then Alaro says, what role does faith play when you are in the battlefield? How do you observe the Sabbath in the front line?
So I like that one. I like that one a lot. Okay, so do you guys like miracle stories?
Yes.
I'll tell you a miracle story.
Tell me.
So 2 weeks ago, I was visiting my father-in-law, and while I was visiting, one of their neighbors said, "You guys have to hear this story from my son, front lines in Gaza now," right? Like, this is her son's story. This
Yeah.
is not, not hearing this removed. Heard this from the source. Said they're in Gaza, and they're in the battlefield, and his commanding officer comes to him, not a religious man at all.
Yeah.
Says, "You're religious, right?" He says, "Yes." He says, "I want you right now, 15 minutes, go into this other room and pray." So go and pray. Guy gets up, goes, says, I don't know what to say, right? Like spontaneous prayer is not is not something that happens, right? Like what do you say in spontaneous prayer? So I'm starting to pray and think about what I'm praying for. He says, and I get this like urge, something, right? Like I start praying from my heart, from the deepest part of my heart, and he says, like, you feel like these spikes in your prayer. It goes up and down. Says, and the officer comes and says, I have no idea what you just did, but a few minutes into when you started praying, this problem was solved. A few minutes afterwards, this problem was solved. He says, after when the end of those 15 minutes, he says, our whole this whole problem that we were having was solved. Right now, obviously, for military reasons, you can't say what all these things are. Right, but he says, the miracles that they saw happening in front of their eyes were so unbelievable. He looked at him, he says, your job is you're the rabbi now for the unit. He says, your job now is you walk around, you're praying for us. While we are marching, you're praying, okay? And you see this, right? We're on a different type of battle. Like, this is not, the miracles that you see, it enhances your belief so much more. There's really endless stories of miracles that are happening. This happened 2 days ago. 2 days ago, there was a unit of Golani that their job is to clear the tunnels, which is the hardest job right now in Gaza. Okay, the terror tunnels that they're holding, that's where they have the hostages. And you have a group that basically went down, and the other group surrounds the house where the tunnel is so that they're not going to get attacked. And when the guys went down in, the group on top couldn't get through to them on the radio. So they got nervous and started to go down. They said they probably got kidnapped, which is like the worst case scenario right now as far as what we're talking about. And they go down into they go down to the tunnels, and while they go down into the tunnels, they see they see an old man with a white beard, and he tells them, he says, stop, don't go in, right? You need to leave this house right now. And they said, like, he doesn't look Arab, he's speaking to them in Hebrew, right? There's like something over there that's different. And they say, like, we need to go. And he says, no, you need to leave right now. And they said they tried to push him out of their way, and their hand went right through him.
What?
Right through him. Okay, this is from I heard this from a rabbi of one of these soldiers. Okay, he says, hand went right through him. And the commanding officer came back and says, what is this old man doing here in the middle of the battlefield with this old rabbi? He says, you need to go. And he goes right through him. He says, the guy, this rabbi tells him, he says, you need to get out right now, right now. They get out of the tunnel. They go out of the house. 20 meters out, the house blows up.
Whoa. Okay.
This guy calls up his rabbi. He says, we saw an angel. An angel tells us to leave, right? Where's your place of spirituality in this place? Yeah. It's a different battlefield. It's a different type of thing.
Okay, my time is up.
So before we finish, let's just leave people with one thing. Right now, people are trying to figure out what they can do for the situation, because the situation is not an Israel-Palestinian conflict. This is good and bad, and this is the entire world is getting involved in this in one way or another. Yeah. The power of prayer is unbelievably powerful, and Kenyans know very well about the power of prayer. Oh, yeah. Right? So everybody pray in your own way. Pray for peace, pray for good, pray for health, pray that that evil is taken out of the world, that we can live in peace, as that is the only thing that we actually want for, right? We want peace. We've extended our hand in peace over and over and over again, because that is what we want. We would love to live in peace with everybody, It is the Jewish dream, is to live in peace, right?
Yes.
And that's what we're looking for. So everybody pray.
Pray.
And that's very, very important. And the second thing that you can do is educate yourself. Really learn history. Really learn the facts. Know what resources are reliable, what are not. Okay? Learn what is propaganda, what is, you know, like we're seeing propaganda that we saw from the Nazis, right? Like there's stuff that's being put out and people are just chanting it in the streets because people have no idea and people are not educated about the history, about the facts, and about what's actually going on. So please educate yourself,
And
learn, educate yourself, pray, and help educate others.
Awesome. Thank you, Rabbi, for coming.
Thank you so much for having
Truly
me.
appreciate. Well, my time is up. I hope you've learned something or you've had something to think about from our conversation this morning, but we have to shut it down because time is up. Until next week for another Motivation Monday conversation, do have a great day and God bless.
Thank you.